Greetings, and welcome to When the Moment Chooses You. I am your host, Coach Charlene, and I am excited today to have Dr. Farah Laurent here. And first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very excited. I'm always looking out there on the LinkedIn land for some really powerful voices to inspire the audience because the reason why I actually started the podcast, I like to kind of start up with a little context, but in 2020 is when all of us experienced such a traumatic event when George Floyd was murdered. And so at that point in my career, I had not been using my voice. I was saying things, but I didn't have a voice. And so, boy, I found my voice in such a profound way. And I just start speaking up and dismantling and really calling out and speaking about the things that I was seeing, really to help bring transformation through storytelling. And so I had the idea of a podcast, but of course, we were going through too much as a profession, as a world, just humanity, period. And so a year and a half later, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm just going to launch out and do it. And so that's where we are. So now I'm just interviewing all you beautiful change agents. So I believe that there are moments in our lives that call us into them if we recognize it. And so that's kind of what I like to unpack people's story about their moments that chose them, because that moment chose me. And I knew it was time for me to begin to step up and bring transformation through my voice. And so that's what I started doing. And so I would love to hear who you are first. Tell us a little bit about who you are. And then let's go into one of your moments that really touched you and brought you into where you are now.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So like you said, my name is Farah. Recently, doctorally prepared nurse. I got my DMP at Monmouth University in organizational leadership. Been a nurse for over 20 years. I know it's hard to believe. I know,
Yes, girl.
but over 20 years, and I'm a joker. I'm always joking around, and I just value having fun because I feel like the ultimate currency is time, and you just have to appreciate it. So I'm always grateful, and I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I've had. I'm a first gen immigrant, moved to Canada when I was 9. So very proud about that. And I'm first in my family to graduate from a bachelor's program and now all the way up to a doctoral program. My sister's a social worker, and I have 2 brothers. So yeah, grew up in Canada and went to nursing school there. I was kind of knew I wanted to be a nurse. Always had an attraction to healthcare, but I was like, I think I'm going to be a nurse, even though some people are like, why don't you be a doctor? And I'm like, nah, I want to be a nurse because I felt like nurses had a lot of interactions with their patients and they spent more time with their patients. And then I started watching this TV show called Trauma Life in the ER. And I was like,
Mm.
that's the type of nurse I want to be. So in nursing school, I would say my defining moment was there was a clinical instructor that asked me, she said, oh, Fair, what type of nurse do you want to be? And I said, I want to be an emergency nurse because it's so much fun. It looks like fun. She said, you'll never be an emergency nurse. She said, you're too unorganized and you should
Oh
just
my
be the
gosh.
med surge. And I was like, I thought you're supposed to be an educator and like uplift. And
Yeah.
so, of course, in my head, I was always very ambitious and very stubborn. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen to her. I'm like, I'm going to do whatever I want. So I was
Hmm.
like, watch me, lady, in my head. And I said, I will get into the ER. And that moment really, um, I think, transformed and built the start of my career. I pursued the ER. I got into the ER in my last rotation. 2 of us got to go. And I built some great relationships. I absolutely loved it. And they told me to apply. So I applied and I actually got hired as a nursing student before I even took my licensing exam, and started working there 2 days after graduation. So it was a lot of pressure because I had to pass my exam to keep my job. So
Yes.
of course I did. And then started out in the ER, which was probably one of the best decisions. And then stayed in Canada for a while, then moved to New York City to pursue travel nursing because I absolutely love to travel.
Mhm.
So that's what I did. I got a bunch of different licenses in different states, but I ended up staying there because I met my husband and had kids and that, and stayed in the New York area. And then I transitioned into education because I really found my calling and passion around education, particularly because of that moment. I told myself, I will go into education, I will inspire nursing students and be the opposite of that educator and be able
Yes.
to uplift other nursing students, support them, empower them. And I said, I'm going to be fun. I'm going to be a fun educator. So I ended up being a clinical instructor for NYU. I was an adjunct faculty. Um, and at the same time, I also landed a clinical educator role at NYU. But my journey was not always as easy as it seemed. Even though I had multiple board certifications, I had all this education, I had my master's in education. Let's be real, right? Real talk. There was some
Mhm.
discrimination,
Yes.
some unfair hiring practices, and let's just say, as we know, not not all people who are the most qualified end up getting jobs. So it took me 2 years after getting my master's to land those education positions, but I was very persistent, and I knew that that's kind of what my passion and calling was. So that's what I've been doing since. Moved up to some education and leadership roles, up to the director of education, um, and then transitioned into academia. And then in that mix, I decided to open up my own business as an entrepreneur. So as a career coach, as a nurse career coach. So I help other nurses really level up in their career and like be empowered to go for what they want, because I don't believe in settling. I'm like, do not.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I love to understand, like from your perspective, why. I mean, the nurse is a pretty successful career, but I love to hear people's transitions. Like, what was it that made you say, you know what? Okay, I'm kind of ready to do entrepreneurship versus this comfort zone of nursing. I
Yeah.
always like to understand why people do that because it really inspires other people that are kind of stuck in
Mhm.
that place and want to launch and do something different. So, any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So actually, never thought that I would open up my own business. What happened was, like I said, throughout my career, I always naturally fell into kind of a coach, educator. People always came to me to ask me about how should I do this interview? What do you think? So I always was a natural coach. I was, was in that state. So then I thought, well, since I'm helping all these people doing their resumes and cover letters and helping them get into nursing school, I said, why don't I just turn this into a business? And I thought about it. And some people, of course, the naysayers or negative people were like, nobody's going to use those services. Nursing students have career services at the university. They're not going to need you. And I'm like, well, I was like, I beg to differ, because I was like, well, there's career services, but they're not nurses. And I'm like, I'm a
Yes.
nurse. And from my perspective, and being in so many different roles, working both in Canada and in the US, being in the emergency room, having critical care, and in education and in leadership, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm the ultimate like career coach, because I can really guide people as to where they go. And I feel like I have a good sense of really connecting with people and really helping them find clarity. So, of course, I thought, I think this is a good idea, but I didn't know where to start. So I decided to open up my LLC. It was in 2021 in the summer. So that's what I did. I was hesitant though, because um, at the time, I think I was the assistant director of education for a large health system, NYC Health and Hospitals. And I thought, well, I don't know, like if I open up this career coach business, I'm going to have to be visible on social media. People may not understand what I'm doing. They're not going to know why I'm out there. And then my employer might start questioning things. So I think a lot of people go through that, especially healthcare professionals. And then you also have to check with your employer what you're allowed and not allowed to do. And I think that's kind of odd, because I feel like you should be allowed to do your own ventures, and as long as it's not a conflict of interest with where you work. So
Right.
I would almost say be wary of places where they're telling you you can't have a second job or something like that. I'm like, you know, um, if you're not going to pay me a crazy a salary, and you're just going to say, oh, I'm going to pay you market value. So then why are you telling people they can't have a second or third job if they choose to, right?
Right.
So the thing that attracted me to entrepreneurship was the freedom to do what it is, the flexibility to do what it is that you want, the creative side of it, and also the part where you're continuously learning, which
Yes.
attracted me to that, and also the ability to generate your own income, right? And I thought, why not? I'm like, we can't be in a box and like, oh, I'm only a nurse and I do this, and it's like, why not? You can do, multiple things at the same time. And mind you, at the time, I was working full time, going to school full time, and my daughter, I think, had just she just turned one when I had a
Oh,
son
wow.
at the time too, who was who was 5. Yeah, so it was busy, but I was like, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it, right? Because everybody doesn't take action because there's always an excuse. They're like, oh, I don't have time. I'll do it next year.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
happens? Yeah.
Well, and I noticed that you started your business right after the double pandemic, right? So that seems so timely. Like now in retrospect, I look at what you're doing and how nurses were starting to make other decisions for their
Yeah.
career. So I think that was like so actually sharp, great insight on your part to launch out and actually do it because I think most people stay in their head and they don't jump out. To be honest, like I've had the dream in my heart for several years, but finally am getting the courage to jump out now. But I know I've talked to so many people that feel like they're stuck. They feel that what you talked about, that it's called like shrink to fit. You need to fit into this mode or you can't be your true authentic self. So that's really powerful. So I want to tap into something you said a little bit early, and that's the barriers. I would love to know what type of barriers that you faced, if you're able to share any with us, just in case somebody else is experiencing some type of barriers. And then let us know how you got through them.
Sure. Can I just clarify the question, meaning barriers in general with my whole career in life or just entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I would say your whole career.
Okay, okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I would say in the beginning, one thing that I would strongly recommend to all healthcare professionals, not just nurses, is to have multiple mentors. I wish that I seeked out more mentorship in the beginning of my career. Although I had a great preceptor, I had a really good preceptor that supported my transition from nursing school to the emergency department. And even when I was done, I always sought that preceptor out for questions, guidance, and things like that. So, and it doesn't have to be a mentor that works in the same organization. It can be anybody out in another place,
Hmm.
because different perspectives help shape you. So I feel that you should have multiple mentors. So that's one big thing. I'm very passionate about mentorship. And I currently, even though I'm a nurse career coach, I do a little bit of mentorship on the side. So I'm a mentor for the Canadian Black Nurses Alliance
Oh,
and also for the American Nurses Association, because I think it's important to also help other nurses, coming up and to give them different perspectives and role model for them. So barriers, I would say, I feel like a lack of information as a young nurse or just a young professional, because sometimes nursing school, or let's just say college and university, I feel like even though, it's great, they provide education, sometimes it's not, a holistic or comprehensive type. What do I mean by that? If you talk to most health professionals or particularly nursing students when they graduate, they feel that they're not prepared for the real world. And of course, nothing prepares you more than experience and like jumping right into it. But I think that was one barrier, the lack of information, not knowing your opportunities. So yesterday I actually did a quick LinkedIn live on like the endless opportunities in nursing. Because for some reason, right, if you're going to school, and they're painting a picture of nursing. Most people think you have to start in a hospital, right?
Right.
But I think nursing schools need to break out of that. And that's why I talk about, I'm here to shatter like old nursing narratives and be like, no, 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 you can do whatever you want. You can start in, public health. You can go right into health policy if you want, and start, doing that type of work. You don't have to follow the traditional linear path that most people do. So I think access to information is a barrier. So mentorship, I think, helps with that. And then I think just myths, right? Like people telling you things that are not truthful or just maybe their perception. Like, oh, you can't do this because of
Yeah.
like, who's they? They said, they said
Yes.
you can't do this. So who are they? It's like either negative people that you're around, or maybe they just, like they say, their perception is just not like they don't have a big world view type thing. So I'm somebody who likes to think big, right? And I'm very ambitious, and I'm like, if someone says no, I'm like, well, why not, right? So barriers, um, in the sense that like you want to stay away from negativity. So I think that's
Yes.
one barrier because then you start uh, kind of doubting yourself. And then the
Yeah.
other thing is, I would say, you know, uh, discrimination and racism in healthcare and nursing is present in society, right? So you can't really get rid of that. But I feel like it's important to speak about it. Um, Also, toxic workplaces in general, I think, is a barrier to advancement. Because nobody wants to stay in a toxic workplace. And I actually just wrote an article for Sigma Theta International, which is a big nursing organization, on how to recognize healthy work environments. 5 tips for that, because I think it's important to really support uh, nurses and making sure they're in healthy work environments. I'm also a big advocate for nurse well-being.
Yes.
I did my doctoral work on nurse well-being and creating a toolkit for stress reduction strategies in nurses. Uh, there are a lot of kind of pressures that are put on nurses, to the point, or even like when I worked in the emergency room, there's a lot of talk about workplace violence, and you see it on the news where people are even being shot or assaulted.
Right.
And then it's like sometimes some people, I'm not going to say who, but some people in the administration would almost say things like, well, it's kind of like part of the job. And it's like, no, it's not part of the job. So we have to be able to speak up and advocate. And I feel like one barrier sometimes in nursing or just in healthcare is sometimes they try to suppress your voice, and say like, oh, don't talk about that or things like that. And there's a nurse that I recently met. I've been following her for a while. Her name is Nurse Alice. She's coined herself like America's favorite nurse. She's all over the media. She's been for years, and she has her story of working at certain hospitals, and they didn't like that she was out there speaking on different topics in healthcare. Um, but that's one thing that we need to do as nurses is educate the public and speak up on certain issues that are in healthcare. So I think those are some barriers, and people need nurses need to learn how to advocate for themselves, advocate for our profession, and advocate for our patients and families, obviously. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, Farah, if you could, there's someone out there and their voice is muted. And so, what would you say to that nurse or healthcare worker that want to speak up, but they just can't speak up? Any starters for them? How can they find their voice in the midst of the institutional darkness?
So I think there's a couple different ways that it can be done. So it's funny that in nursing school, I was not a big fan of writing. I didn't like writing a bunch of essays, right? But I found myself later actually enjoying writing and writing short articles and things like that. So I think one way is perhaps to write, right? So there are a lot of nursing magazines or healthcare magazines. You can start writing articles, even on LinkedIn. If you look, there's a section where you can start writing articles. And I think that's kind of like an easy way to start speaking out about certain things and not cause too much, you know, friction if you don't want to be visible per se, like out there making videos or something like that. So I think that's one thing, writing. I'm also a contributor to Minority Nurse. I write articles once in a while for them. So I think that's one big way. Another way would be to be like on podcasts, you know, things like your podcast gives people a safe space to kind of speak on different topics. Um, and then I think joining professional organizations,
Yeah.
nursing organizations, because I feel like you find your tribe. You find
Yes.
like minded people kind of like you. So I'm a part of many different organizations. One of them is the ANA, like I mentioned, also the ENA, which is the Emergency Nurses Association. And then there are others. Like I just, before graduating, I got awarded a doctoral scholarship from the NYC um, Black Nurses Association. So there are so many associations out there, professional organizations that you can link up with. Also, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, there's something called the NNBA. It's the National Nurses and Business Association, and there's a ton out there. So I say find your group of people because, as they say, right, you're stronger and in unity and bigger numbers.
Yes.
Um, and then if you're finding that you're somewhere where your values don't align with the organization, or say maybe just that leader who's currently there, and it's causing you a lot of anxiety or like physical ailments, then it's not worth it. Then it's time to just start looking for something else. Um, Somewhere where you can be appreciated, valued, and you feel like you do have a voice to speak up. So I would say those are some tips.
That's wonderful. So I'd love for you now to just tell us who you are, what you do, because I know someone probably is out there that really need your services. So just educate us on what you do and what you can be
Sure.
an impact in.
So, like I said, I'm a nurse career coach. I work with all types of nurses. Majority of my clients are from Canada and the US. Uh, the majority of my clients happen to be senior nursing students or new graduate nurses. So I help them with career guidance, finding clarity. Maybe they're not sure what type of job they want to go into or where to start their career. So I help them with that. And then we do a lot of mindset work. I didn't think that in the beginning, but it's really a lot of mindset and a lot of kind of going back and helping them find their story and back to their
Mm.
purpose, like why they went into nursing, and using storytelling in the interview process. And then to really reinforce, like, this is why you should. Oop, I knocked over my mic. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Um, why they should pursue the areas that they do, because some of them will say, well, I really like the ICU, but I don't think I can get into it, so I'm just going to settle for this other thing. And I'm like, no, no, we're not going to do that. So I really help them find that confidence, and we work through it, and really empowering them. So a lot of it has to do with mindset, manifestation, and really believing and doing some of that work so that they can really feel empowered to go for it. And then reminding them that they are qualified, right? They went to school, or whether they have 1 year or 2 or 5 years experience or 20, they are qualified. A lot of people struggle with self-esteem issues, even as a nurse who's experienced. So I help a lot with that. So we really do like mostly interviewing, resume, cover letters. And then we develop a plan, like a strategic plan. Like, so maybe if they'd like to be a chief nursing officer one day, I kind of walk through them to say, okay, this is kind of like the path that you should take to get you there. And then we work on personal branding a little bit, of like how they should be showing up, how they should dress to the interview, even on LinkedIn, if they're not afraid to get out there, how to position themselves on LinkedIn. So right now I'm accepting clients who are both experienced, and I'm starting a new mentorship program like a cohort of new graduate nurses, and it's going to be group coaching, and I'm going to be doing it in like 6 month intervals. So I'm excited to start that very soon. So I'm accepting uh, nurses for that program as well. I'm also a speaker. Spoke at a couple different conferences nationally and locally. So I really want to expand that speaking. I speak on different topics. I'll be speaking in Nashville, God willing, at the Nurse Boss Summit about personal branding. Um, yeah, and then writing. I write, and I wrote a book.
Yes, let's hear about the book. Nurses Making Money Moves. Okay, then. I like the title.
It actually was inspired by Cardi B, one of her songs.
Oh,
But anyway, so yeah, I called it Nurses Making Money Moves, a nurse's guide to starting a business. And this could be found on my website, nursefair.com. And it talks about entrepreneur mindset, how to create a business plan, different ideas of how to start a business, things like that. And
oh, that's wonderful.
it's mostly geared towards any nurses interested in coaching or consulting, but a lot
Yeah.
of the principles can be applied to really any business to begin with. Yeah.
And do you also do coaching with those nurses that do want to start their own business? You do that as well?
Yes, I've started doing that. Actually, two nurses who read the book that I met at the NMBA started up their own business. So I do mostly the startup part in like personal branding and the social media, how to be active on social media. And I would say LinkedIn is probably one of the better platforms if you own a business because people are there for more professional reasons. So I'd say
Right.
you should really be active on LinkedIn. That would be a good place.
Wow. That is so amazing. And you're a nurse, slaying it. Yay. No, that's super awesome. So I'm gonna I know we have to end, but what I want to end with um is you telling us three wisdom gems. I like to do like Farah's top three. And it can just be on, it doesn't, I don't like to structure it to be honest, but top three wisdom gems from Dr. Laurent. What would that be?
Okay, wisdom gems.
Yes. For living life on purpose. Let's go that direction.
So I would say number one, I would say choose positivity and choose to be happy. I would say that's the first gem because from a young age, I've always been someone who's just, always happy and lighthearted and having fun. And I truly think it is a choice to be positive because it does take some work, right? So I think be positive, make that choice. And then number two, I would say similar to that, I would say be grateful and have like, as they say, attitude of gratitude. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna promote myself again. I wrote this journal. It's called, you can't really see it there.
90-day gratitude journal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
90-day gratitude journal. It could be found on Amazon. And inside you can write, it's like what you're grateful for, your goals, all that stuff, and then manifesting. So that's on Amazon. You can check it out. So that
Awesome.
I would say that's number two is being grateful because I feel like a lot of people live in this scarcity mindset. And I still have to do some work with that because really, if you think in abundance and like there's enough for everybody, you know, that type of mindset, then I think when you put good out into the world, you'll get, more good back into your world. So that's two. Number three. That's a tough one. I would say number three, the gem really is, I think the key to having a fulfilling life is to really serve others. I think that's big because usually when you give to others, when you serve others, you usually, right, there's like you get a better feeling in the gift of giving,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one. And then I'll tie to that professional development and advancement, like continuously learning from others, And then just continuous improvement, because there's always room for improvement, not just professionally, obviously, but both personally and professionally.
Well, those are beautiful. So now let us know how we can get in touch with you.
Sure. So the biggest platform I would say is LinkedIn. You could check me out there, or you can go to my website. It's nursefarah.com. So that's probably
Okay.
the easiest way.
Okay, great. Well, it was really just refreshing to
Yeah.
have you on the podcast. And I hope you come back a little bit later. You're welcome anytime. I love to
Yes.
inspire nurses. So this is really what this is for. So if you ever want to come on again, please do. You have definitely blessed me for today. And I'm definitely going to be getting those books as I am a reader. So I have to have that. So I will put the books in the link in the
Awesome.
description so people can get it pretty quickly. And I
Mhm.
just really honor you and thank you for your contributions to humanity, how you're impacting our profession and just being such a light in our profession. So thank you so much for all you do.
Well, thank you for, amplifying other healthcare professionals and having this podcast. And, you should be proud that you're doing this as well, because not many people are out there kind of putting themselves out there, and being visible. It's not easy. So I just want to say thank you for doing that, because you definitely will. You are impacting probably a lot of lives. And something that I wanted to share quickly before we end, someone reached out to me on LinkedIn once, and it was so powerful. She like almost brought me to tears. She booked a call with me, and I thought it was going to be like a potential client. And she just booked a call with me just to tell me how much my content, my written content, and whatever, all that stuff on LinkedIn has impacted her, because she said
Oh,
she was in a very toxic workplace. Her supervisor was like almost very abusive. And then she felt like she had enough courage to switch and go into something else. So, I just wanted to say that even though you may think this is not reaching a lot of people, it is, and you probably don't know who's watching or listening. So, it's a big.
oh, thank you. I received that goodness, definitely. Yes, thank you so much. Okay, and thank you, listeners. And I will
Thank
put
you.
all the information down in the description.
And I want to invite you to the Nursing Dose with Farah, my show. If you
Yes,
get a chance.
please. Yes,
Yes.
tell us before we close. Tell us
Oh,
about
it's
that.
on YouTube and some other, I stream on other like platforms, but mostly YouTube, The Nursing Dose with Farah. And I'd love to have you on when you're free. It's a podcast slash like live streaming on LinkedIn.
Oh, awesome. Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you so much
Okay.
again.
I want to thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of When the Moment Chooses You. I'm your host, Coach Charlene, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Each journey we've shared today is a reminder that when the moment chooses you, the possibilities are endless.